Thank you, everybody, for your patience for that while I was setting up. Thank you to Ben and Hillary and Mark and Penny for this wonderful opportunity to talk about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, the World War I submarine chaser movie ML286. So it's poetry in movie motion, embodied inquiry in the poetical narrative of World War I submarine chaser, movie ML286. Motor launches were called movies because of the animated way that they moved in the water. So just as a brief introduction before I go into the poetical side of my presentation. So these are the archaeological remains of ML286. She is hulked between the dry dock at B.J. Wood & Son Boatyard in Isleworth 8, West London, and the 8. And she's in a very vibrant, muddy landscape. She is most likely the last surviving of this type of vessel, so her importance is really substantial. And between April 1915 and November 1916, 550 of these vessels were commissioned by the British Admiralty. They were built in the Electric Launch Company, Elko in Bayonne, New Jersey. So they were prefabricated in Elko, and they were sent up to Quebec, Canada for assemblage. And that was due to the neutrality of the United States at the time, in that time period of the war. So 500 of these vessels were created. So what I wanted to do with my research, I do transdisciplinary research. So my background is an actress. I started off as an actress. And so I can't help but look through things through that theatrical narrative. So what I wanted to do is really tell the story. So I looked at different narratives, archival narratives from the National Archives, narratives of those who actually served aboard the MLs. And actually, this is a first edition. It's a signed edition. It's one of my most treasured possessions of Lieutenant Gordon S. Maxwell. So it's material culture within its own right. So he's written a lot of material, a lot of poetry in this book, and one is called an elegy, which is based on Thomas Gray's Elegy in a Country Churchyard, where he is actually saying that those who served in the motor launch patrol died as they lived, unsung and obscure. So I'm always fighting for the underdog, and I wanted to make their story not obscure. And so this poster here, I reproduced. It's a poster that was used in the Zeebrugge concert. So 2 days before the raids on Zeebrugge and Ostend, they put together like a pantomime concert. And just to note here where it says Professor D.B. Robinson and Oswald the Great Impersonator, that's Lieutenant Oswald Robinson. He was the second ML officer killed during the raids on Zeebrugge and Ostend. And Gordon S. Maxwell, in his other book, The Motor Launch Patrol, writes very poignantly about the loss of Lieutenant Robinson. I'm also looking at the narratives of Lieutenant Eric P. Dawson, who wrote a book called Pushing Water. I'm also looking at the poetical narratives of Sub-Lieutenant Rupert Brooke, who died of septicemia from a mosquito bite and is buried on the island of Skyros. And his best friend, William Dennis Brown, died a few weeks later. He was shot in the shoulder and in the stomach. And I'm also looking at the artistic narratives. Lieutenant Jeffrey Stephen Alfrey was commander of ML286, and very sadly, he drowned on the 29th of September in 1918. He's commemorated on the Portsmouth Naval Memorial on South Sea Common. I also interviewed several people. So Dr. Samantha Brummage, who's here with us today, she helped to clean and record the vessel from 2017 to 2019. I also interviewed Dr. Martin Bates, archaeologist, my good friend David Judson, who's a sea shanty singer with the London Sea Shanty Collective, and another very good friend of mine, Russell, who also helped to clean and record ML286 in 2018. And I looked even at the narratives of the wonderful geese that occupied the landscape there in my script, and looking at mini beasts and flora and fauna, the narratives of nature in this landscape of nature and archaeology. So I called my piece Still Life Movie to sort of imply there is still life in this vessel, even though she's still. And so what I did was I curated all of those narratives, just laid them out on the floor, put them into different typologies, and created a 45-minute one-woman performance. And I even wrote my own sea shanty, so I contributed my own narrative to this project. For dissemination of my research, I created a replica of the transom of ML286, created my own semaphore flags, and learnt semaphore. So these were in the boat with me, and a replica of the Dunkirk flag, because she was also a Dunkirk little ship as well. And it also, I'm expanding on the idea again about replicas, that they possess their own authenticity and their own agency based on the writings of Sean Jones and Sally M. Foster, who write about St. John's cross in Iona, the replica of that cross, in a really great book called My Life as a Replica. And as an actress, I'm always replicating what's gone on before. So again, that's just the reproduction of the original poster. And I created my own logo for the show. And this was me in the summer. So I was actually submerged in the vessel. And my supervisors came to see that. And look what she did. Like, she provided her own backdrop. She just was in all her glory. So she was really working with me. And I've always said right from the start, ML286 and I were co-performers. And what I like about the sense that her decaying body is turned inside out to reveal new truths. And so she now became the stage, the platform where she invited me in to speak for her and provide all these narratives. So that's just a few pictures of my supervisors coming along to see me, Dr. Erica Hughes, Dr. George Burrows, and Dr. Vincent Adams. And again, dissemination of my work. So I performed this at uni in October, but I'm currently in the process of taking the show to the Southampton City Art Gallery, because that's where two of Lieutenant Alfrey's paintings are kept. So we're going to be having Lieutenant Alfrey's paintings in the background. And I'm also hoping to perform this in Boatyard 4 in the historic dockyard. But that was one of the really important things about building this replica. But just as a quick example, at the very end, when I'm quoting from Sub-Lieutenant Rupert Brooke, and he says, "Wings where I may never go, leaves her lying still and fair," the replica became my wings. And then when I say waiting empty laid aside like a dress upon a chair, I folded up the replica and I laid it against the chair. So replicas do come in handy. They do provide other meanings. So this is the ML286 in the 1980s. She was an abandoned houseboat. So lots of the MLs were stripped of their engines and turned into houseboats. So she was Cordon Rouge in the 1920s, Eothen in the 1930s, and was a Dunkirk little ship in the 1940s. So what I thought I would do is that's sort of the background of my research. And I just wanted to let my boys take over, and they are going to continue the story. And so without any further ado, I'm handing it over to them. And if the spirit be not there, why is fragrance in the hair? He who saddens at the thought of idleness cannot be idle, and he's awake who thinks himself asleep. What are those distant shapes dimly ahead? Brave ships that fought and fell, brave men who died, shadows of yesterday living though dead, sleeping eternally under the tide. They say that the dead die not, but remain near to the rich airs of their grief and mirth. The conscious impotence of rage at human folly and the laceration of laughter, what ceases to amuse. At last, the rending pain of reenactment of all that you have done and been, the shame of things ill done and done to others' harm, which once you took for exercise of virtue. I remember those first days on patrol when guileless subs had yet to learn how MLs pitch and roll. The jet black night, the days of fog, the gale's fierce steering strife. We didn't get much comfort, but my hat, we did see life. A nobleman, notary, navvy, a nut, a banker, a butcher, a baker, a drover, a dentist, a dustman, a duke, a cabman, a candlestick maker. I look where no one dares, and I stare where no one stares. So I find words I never thought to speak, in streets I never thought I should revisit, when I left on a distant shore. There are flood and drought over the eyes and in the mouth, dead water and dead sand, contending for the upper hand. Attend, O ye who list to hear of Harry Tate's navy. Of all our country's naval hopes, the very first are we. Where Harry Tate's Harry Tate's are we. Where Harry Tate's navy. Our admiral is Harry Tate, a leader brave and bold. Hey, and Captain Frederick Carner too is worth his weight in gold. But just to keep us more complete and versed in seaman's lore, we're asking Charlie Chaplin down to be our Commodore. Where Harry Tate's are we. Where Harry Tate's navy. The smile that is essential she. Well, this is the end of a perfect night, near the end of our ML frail, and our cabin looks like a cistern burst in the midst of a jumble sail. But we never dream of a glory gained or the DSOs will win. But sadly think as we gaze around, what a hell of a mess we're in. The floods of tears these victims shed left very little dry land, and by this baptism of tears, renamed it Whale Island. Once at navigation class, I fear I fell asleep, and dreamed I steered a fine ML across the vasty deep. I soon espied upon a rock a sea nymph passing fair. Her outstretched arms were white as snow, and golden was her hair. I leapt upon the rock and clasped the sea maid in my arms, for I was quite enchanted by the sweetness of her charms. Oh, Mary, Mary, mournful Mary, how does your siren blow? Oh, Mary, Mary, mournful Mary, whispering sweet and low. But nothing can touch our gramophone, and every day our gratitude goes out to the Canadian lady who kindly provided us with our music box. The bells are ringing for me and my gal. This is the use of memory for liberation from the future as well as the past. Not known because not looked for, but heard, half heard in the stillness between two waves of the sea. What knows the world on land of all the deeds of those who man these vessels round our coast? Their pathway seldom lies where glory leads, nor forms the topic for a country's boast. We owe our all to this grey strip of wave, this moat that keeps our castle isle secure, where rest these men who died this isle to save, and died as they lived, unsung, obscure. He is ne'er crowned with immortality who fears to follow where airy voices lead. At length, when the war's at an end and we're just ourselves, you and I, and we gather our lives up to men, we who've learned how to live and die, I think we shall crave the laughter of the wind through trees, gold with the sun, when our strife is all finished, after the carnage of war is done. I am a part of all that I have met. Dawn was theirs, and sunset, and the colors of the earth. We passed Rupert's Island at sunset, every colored come into the sea and sky to do him honor. Move eastward, happy earth, and leave your orange sunset waning slow. There is an isle beyond our ken, haunted by dreams of weary men. Gray hopes enshadow it with wings, weary with burdens of old things. And what the dead had no speech for, when living, they can tell you being dead. The communication of the dead is tongued with fire beyond the language of the living. Shed no tear, shed no tear. The flower will bloom another year. Weep no more, oh, weep no more. Young buds sleep in the root's white core. When she sleeps, her soul, I know, goes a wander on the air, wings where I may never go. Leaves her lying still and fair, waiting empty, laid aside like a dress upon a chair.